Week number 9 of the 2025 fantasy football season kicked off last night in a beatdown of the Miami Dolphins at the hands of the Baltimore Ravens. In today's video, we are going to be breaking down my top 40 wide receiver rankings and tiers for week number 9 of the 2025 fantasy football season. We are going to try to attempt to right our wrongs potentially from Thursday Night Football or build on that lead that we have acquired. I would like to wish you guys all a happy Halloween if you guys are watching this on Friday. I hope you have a good one, and that is why I'm dressed as the Cookie Monster. If you are a new viewer to the channel, I don't normally dress as the Cookie Monster, so if you guys do end up enjoying today's video, make sure you guys do hit that subscribe button down below if you are new. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with my must-start wide receiver ones, my tier number 1 at the wide receiver position: Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Puka Nacua, Rashee Rice, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Rome Odunze, Ladd McConkey, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Michael Pittman Jr., and Jalen Waddle. Now, Jalen Waddle did already play on Thursday Night Football. He had a solid game, so we're not going to talk about him after this because he already played, and you can't magically insert him in your lineup if for some reason you did sit him. Jamar Chase is my wide receiver 1 going up against the Chicago Bears, the 11th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. Jamar Chase with Joe Flacco is basically just a free square to finish as a top 5 wide receiver. 3 straight games as a top 5 wide receiver with Joe Flacco. 4 straight games because he had one with Jake Browning as well, where he's the wide receiver 2. Back in week number 5, Joe Flacco is banged up, but based on everything that I've read, it seems like Joe Flacco is going to be good to go. Jamar Chase is simply just going to get a gazillion targets. Joe Flacco is smart. He realized that, hey, if I just feed Jamar Chase, the offense is going to work out. 19 targets last week, 23 targets the week prior. He was the wide receiver 4 last week, the wide receiver 1 the week prior to that. I don't need to sit here for 5 minutes and suck off Jamar Chase, metaphorically, of course. You already know he needs to be in your lineup. At number 2, we got Jackson Smith-Njigba going up against the left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders in Washington, the 9th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Jackson Smith-Njigba is one of the most consistent pieces in fantasy football week in and week out. Doesn't matter if the Seattle Seahawks offense looks great. Doesn't matter if the Seattle Seahawks offense is sleeping with the fishes. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to feast, and coming out the bye week with 3 straight games as a top 7 wide receiver, 3 straight games with 26 plus PPR points, you got to be feeling incredible about JSN this week. Next up, we got Puka Nacua, who is good to go on Sunday up against the New Orleans Saints. I know having Puka Nacua gone for that one game up against the Jaguars and then the bye week, if you're relying on Puka Nacua, it certainly hurt like a butt cheek on a stick, but now the man is back to face off up against the Saints this week in what is the 22nd best matchup for wide receivers. I know that might sound a little bit scary, but Puka Nacua is Puka Nacua. Outside of week number 6, where he got hurt up against the Ravens as the wide receiver 69. Very nice. I like. Prior to that, he was a top 6 wide receiver in 5 straight games. We ain't panicking off of a matchup for Puka Nacua. Then we got Rashee Rice going up against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo in what should be the highest scoring game of the week, the 24th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. But with Rashee Rice, just like we talked about with Puka Nacua, I don't care at all. We are going to see him get fed in this spot. Mahomes loves this guy as the wide receiver 1. He didn't love him enough last year because sadly he ended up sticking his knee and taking out his ACL, and that's why he missed a lot of last season. I think he only played like 3 or 4 games last season. Back-to-back weeks as a top 10 wide receiver. Had they not have pulled the plug on all of the starters up against the Raiders because they're winning by so much earlier on in the game, I think Rashee Rice probably would have been a top 5 wide receiver in back-to-back weeks. 3 total touchdowns over his first 2 starts. Again, the matchup might be rough. Should be the highest scoring game of the week, though. You need Rashee in your lineup. Now we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, ARSB, going up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings at home in Detroit, the 25th best matchup for wide receivers. But just like these previous 2 guys we've talked about, we don't give a shit about the matchup. This is another guy that is just like wrapping 3,000 condoms around your fantasy team. He is as safe as it gets week in and week out. Only 1 game outside the top 20, and that was back in week number 1. Coming out the bye week, you got to expect greatness out of Amon-Ra week in and week out. Then we got CeeDee Lamb going up against the Arizona Cardinals on Monday Night Football. Now, despite the fact that the Denver Broncos had the Dallas Cowboys offense looking inept last week on Sunday in Mile High, things didn't didn't go very well. Dak Prescott absolutely had a terrible game, yet still CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver number 18. So in a better matchup this week up against the Cardinals, I mean, the Broncos are just the worst matchup, so any other matchup would be better than this. The 23rd best matchup again, you are not sitting CeeDee Lamb. Then we got win in Rome, a doomsday of the Chicago Bears going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. Anytime you get to go up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, you are feeling real nicey. I understand they are the 20th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis, but a guy like Rome Odunze, who was the wide receiver 8 last week, who was very consistent prior to the bye, played pretty bad in back-to-back games because Caleb Williams wasn't playing the best. But up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, I expect a high-scoring Rock'em Sock'em Robots affair here, assuming Joe Flacco's health. Rome Odunze has the ability to be the wide receiver number 1 in any given game. And this week, up against the Bengals, is no different, who just got sliced and diced their way through by Breece Hall, Justin Fields, and the Jets last week. Now we move to Ladd McConkey of the LA Superchargers going up against the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. The first 4 games of the season, if you were a Ladd McConkey owner, you were ready to just be done with the guy. People were talking about trading Ladd McConkey for a half-eaten bag of potato chips. And I told everyone to hold the door like my name was Hodor. I told everyone, do not panic yet. Sure, I'm a little bit worried. We don't panic. And if you held Ladd McConkey through the sad first 4 weeks of the season, you have been embraced by greatness over the last 4 weeks. 2 of 4 of those games as the wide receiver number 6. The LA Superchargers offense is percolating. The LA Superchargers offense is running at maximum power in the 10th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis, coming off the wide receiver 6 performance up against the Vikings. I expect another huge game out of Ladd McConkey. Now we got Justin Jefferson going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit in terms of a matchup. This is the 7th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Do I trust JJ McCarthy? Fuck no, baby. But Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson. You are not sitting him in such a mouth-watering matchup up against the Lions, even if with JJ McCarthy, Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver 21 and 39 through the first 2 games of the season. Now we move to Davante Adams of the LA Rams going up against the New Orleans Saints. Now, without Puka Nacua, Davante Adams was living rent-free inside the end zone. Not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns up against the Jaguars in Duval. Just kidding. The game wasn't in Jacksonville. It was in London, baby. And they're coming off the bye week. Puka's back. I know Davante Adams wasn't as upper echelon of an option with Puka Nacua healthy, but he's a very reliable top 24 option, and I think he could easily finish as a top 12 asset this week. Final guy in this tier is going to be Michael Pittman, even though Jalen Waddle was in this tier, but we ain't talking about him because he already played. Michael Pittman Jr. has been the textbook definition of boom or bust. Starts off the season, wide receiver 8 up against the Dolphins. Took them to the cleaners. Wide receiver 64, 13, 22, 21, 78, 14 in the wide receiver 3 last week up against the Tennessee Titans. Up against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that has been far from ideal this season. The 6th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Why believe anything outside the fact that Michael Pittman Jr. is going to feast in this spot? Now we move to tier number 2, the must-start high-end wide receiver 2s with Drizzy, Drake London, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Chris Olave, as well as Nico Collins. Zay Flowers was also in this tier as well. Drizzy Drake London is good to go after missing last week up against the Dolphins in a game where I would have expected him to go absolutely bananas. He's dealing with the hip injury, but he practiced on Friday, so he's good to go. Drake London this season has been a target hog. I understand that it hasn't always equaled the best fantasy performance, but in 4 of 6 games, he had 10 or more targets. He has a game with 15 targets, and he also has a game with 16 targets. I understand that playing up against the Patriots defense on paper might not sound like the most delectable matchup. It's the 19th best matchup for wide receivers, though. I understand that we don't trust Michael Penix Jr. with the utmost amount of confidence, but Drake London has been that good. He's been getting so many targets. You just have to believe in him. Then we got DK Metcalf going up against the Indianapolis Colts at home in Pittsburgh in Heinz Field, even though it is not called that anymore. This is the fourth best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. DK Metcalf over the last 4 weeks has 3 games as a top 13 wide receiver. 1 game as the wide receiver 43 up against the Bengals. He has scored a touchdown in 5 of the last 6 games. This is a guy that Aaron Rodgers clearly trusts heavily. I wish Arthur Smith would just kind of lean the offense more into the favor of DK Metcalf. What I mean by that is, instead of getting like 7-ish targets, if they just said, F it, give him 10 targets, then I think he could be a guy that we're talking about as like a must-start top 10 option every single week, but he's still a very high-end, upper echelon guy that you want in your lineup, especially in the matchup up against the Colts. Then we got George Pickens going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Again, the Dallas Cowboys absolutely played terribly up against the Denver Broncos. I thought maybe the Dallas Cowboys offense was so great. They have the boom, firepower. They were going to play great regardless of the matchup, and obviously that didn't end up going their way, but George Pickens, just like CeeDee Lamb, still had a good finish. He was the wide receiver 17 last week, 7 receptions on 9 targets for 78 yards. I understand that when we talked about the Cardinals matchup earlier, this isn't the most mouth-watering matchup. It's the 23rd best matchup for wide receivers, but I expect Dak Prescott to get back on the saddle like his name was Arthur Morgan and have a much bigger showing, so you definitely want to be invested in George Pickens this week. Then we move to Chris Olave going up against the LA Rams. I said this in the wide receiver start sit video. Going from Spencer Rattler to going to Tyler Shuck is not like going from, Tua and magically now they have Patrick Mahomes, right? That is not how this works. They are both not that good at all. Could this lead to a slight uptick for Chris Olave? Potentially, but I wouldn't say that this is going to be like a life-changing move. Now the Saints are a fucking absolute wagon. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Chris Olave is a guy that just sucks in so many targets game in and game out. He has been a top 24 wide receiver in 3 straight games. He is a very reliable option game in and game out. I understand that the Rams defense should be able to get a decent amount of pressure on Tyler Shuck in his first ever NFL start, but this is the 15th best matchup for wide receiver, and as long as the offense just leans into what they've been doing with Spencer Rattler, which is just feed the ball to Chris Olave. America runs on Duncan. That used to be the ads, and now they have Ben Affleck and Tom Brady, Jen Affleck on the Affleck in the commercials. But America used to run on Duncan, and the New Orleans Saints run on Chris Olave. Now we move to the final guy in this tier, Nico Collins going up against the Denver Broncos. Now, I want to rank Nico Collins higher than this. I love Nico Collins. The Houston Texans offense has looked significantly better since coming out the bye week. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the O-line issues have been cut out. Shout out to Joey Gladstone. Cut it out right and are completely gone. I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. The offensive line is still a complete and utter unmitigated disaster, but they've been playing better. They figured it out. No Nico Collins last week up against the 49ers. Again, this is the worst matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis, but there is no Patrick Surtain this week, so I think Nico Collins could still have a field day here. Now we move to tier number 3. My wide receivers 19 through 25. Brian Thomas Jr., Debo Samuel, Marvin Harrison Jr., Tedero McMillan, Tee Higgins, Keenan Allen, and Stephon Diggs, my low-end wide receiver 2s. Before we break down these wide receivers as well as the west of the wide receivers in my rankings for the week, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friend star partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you will get a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you play $5 in the pick'em, you receive an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. How does this work, Nick? It is incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks on the higher or the lower. If those picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but obviously all of the picks need to hit, so make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy that definitely worries me this week. We saw the emergence of Travis Hunter prior to the bye up against the Rams, and BTJ ends up getting banged up. But now you fast forward to week number 9, coming out the bye up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Viva Las Vegas, and guess what? Guess what? This is the third best matchup for wide receivers. And guess what? Somehow, some way, Travis Hunter is out. He got hurt. They put him on IR in practice, which is just the worst place to get injured because it wasn't even during a game. It was during practice. When we talk about practice, shout out to Allen Iverson. So now BTJ's back in the driver's seat. All of these kind of woes, these worries about, oh, maybe BTJ's crown's going to get stolen as the wide receiver one in this offense. That, talking point is now just dead. He has been banged up. He was banged up with the shoulder injury. So I want to rank him higher because the matchup is so good, but I can't. But with Travis Hunter kind of out of the picture, well, out of the picture for now, you're going to want to play BTJ, as gross as that may sound. Now we got Deebo Samuel going up against the Seahawks. No Terry McLaurin. Very unlucky season if you drafted Terry McLaurin. Now, I was someone that was pretty off of Terry McLaurin. I didn't think the connection was going to work with Jaden Daniels early on. I thought he was kind of just a waste of a pick at that ADP. Obviously, I didn't expect him to get hurt, though, and I would never, victory dance, hit the fucking Irish jig on Terry McLaurin's grave because he re-aggravated a quad injury and be like, you're an idiot if you drafted him, because obviously, while I didn't think he was a good draft pick, could have been. He easily could have been. There's still a lot of season left, and sadly, he ends up getting hurt. Hopefully, he's able to come back soon, though. For Deebo Samuel, not so hot up against the Chiefs, misses week 7 in a amazing matchup up against the Cowboys, and he was the wide receiver 61 up against the Bears the week prior to that. No Terry McLaurin, no Marcus Mariota. Jaden Stormy Daniels is back. Deebo Samuel's value needs to be inflated more. Now I get, after he's fucked you in the ass not once, but twice, you might be worried about it happening thrice this week, but with Jaden Stormy Daniels back, I definitely want Deebo in my lineup. Again, I get he's not technically a must-start wide receiver too, but basically everyone that's like a top 24 wide receiver for most of your fantasy teams, these are guys you want to play. Now, the Seahawks defense has been ferocious. They are the 17th best matchup for wide receivers. I do expect Jaden Daniels to look like a deer in headlights at points in this game because the Seahawks defense is great at generating turnovers. Tua turned the ball over. Thank God that we fired Chris Greer. We're not going to talk about that until, next week, but, it's a joyous day. Nick, you got smacked by Lamar Jackson. I don't care. I'm happy. Chris Greer's gone. The bad man is gone. So Deebo Samuel, bounce back is inevitable. Shout out to Thanos. Then we got Maserati, Marvin Harrison Jr., who's been downgraded, I said this in the wide receiver video, to Mitsubishi Marv. He's driving he's going from driving, a Lamborghini or Maserati, I guess, the fancy cars. I'm not a big car guy, to driving one of those little cars that you had as a kid. I had one of those where it's like red and yellow, and you like push your feet through it, and you like pretend to steer it. You know what I'm talking about? It's like the fucking Yabba Dabba Doo car from the Flintstones where they use their feet to power it, right? That's what I was doing. That's what he's got, like the little Tykes car. Seems like Kyler might be out again. Now, that's great news for Trey McBride. Not so great news for Marvin Harrison Jr., who was abysmally bad with Jacoby Brissett under center. But the Dallas matchup is way too good to sit him. That's kind of just it. That's what has me inflating his ranking. The Dallas Cowboys, again, it's like it's free reign. It's a free great matchup. It's the best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Now we move to Monsieur Tetero McMillan T-Mac. Bryce Young should be back this week with Andy Dalton, despite that the offense was completely and utterly limp dick with Andy Dalton, the red rifle, under center. Tetero McMillan was still the wide receiver 11 up against the Buffalo Bills, 7 of 10 from 99 yards, almost his second 100-yard game, but of course he is 1 yard short. If Tetero McMillan just had a better quarterback, we would be oogling and ogling over this guy weekly, but he just doesn't. The matchup up against the Packers, I know a lot of people are scared of the Packers, but they are the 13th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. I'm not going to sit here and bounce on the metaphorical schlong of Bryce Young, but I just hope Bryce Young's better than what we saw to Andy Dalton last week. And Tetero McMillan should be fine to at least finish as a top 24 guy, even if he's not able to hit his apex this week. Then we got T. Higgins going up against the Chicago Bears. Now, a lot of people might look at last week's game up against the Jets, and their, panic meter starts going off. Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. Like in SpongeBob, you start to panic. He has 1 reception on 2 targets. 2 targets for 44 yards and a touchdown. I know, Nick, that's scary, just 2 targets, but the 2 games prior with Flacco, 10 targets and 8 targets, back-to-back games with the touchdown. So if he gets 2 targets again, it might be Mayday time. It might be panic time. But up against the Chicago Bears that allow the 11th most points to wide receivers on a per game basis. Again, we are assuming the health of Joe Flacco based on the most recent reports. I'm playing T. Higgins. I'm a little scared, but I'm playing him. And again, I'm not fully scared because of the games prior to that with the target share. Then we got Keenan Allen. Now, Keenan Allen has been like that Mia Khalifa song, hit or miss. I guess they never miss, huh? If you were on TikTok back in like the COVID era, you would know what I'm talking about. If you're, not a fucking child like myself who's on TikTok, you have no idea what I was talking about. Shout out to Mia Khalifa, though. Wide receiver 48 back in week number 8 up against the Vikings. Wide receiver 3 the week prior to that up against the Colts. We have a mouth-watering matchup this week up against the Titans, like we were talking about earlier, the 10th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. So while Keenan Allen is hit or miss, and while I think most weeks you're going to see one guy on the Chargers just go banana lands, the second guy finishes like a top 24 wide receiver. The other guy has you wishing you could go back in time, hop in the hot tub time machine and change your lineup. But with how Quentin Johnston's been faring in this offense, I think Keenan Allen's more the reliable top 24 asset. Then we got Stephon Diggs going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I wish I knew with a lot more confidence that we would end up seeing this guy, Stephon Diggs, be the clear wide receiver 1 on this team. And what I mean by that is he is the best wide receiver on this team, but they don't utilize him like that, right? They don't go all in with the snaps. They don't give him 60+% of snaps. They don't give him the 80% of the snaps that I believe he deserves. So we're kind of just sitting here kind of in limbo on Stephon Diggs. You know he's the most talented wide receiver on the roster. You know that the New England Patriots have the upside to beat the shit out of any defense. I get on paper the Falcons defense is rough. 28th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. We just saw Jalen Waddle go nuclear up against them last week. So Stephon Diggs could have a big game. But until they further cement his role in this offense, anything other than like a low-end wide receiver 2 ranking seems way too high. Even though I think if they leaned into him, gave him 7+ targets, he could be a reliable top 12 option, in my opinion. Now we move to tier number 4, which is going to be my high-end wide receiver number 3s. It's not getting gross yet. Definitely grosser than what we've been talking about, but these guys are still fine. Cortland Sutton, Wandale Robinson, Mr. 305, Khalil, Shakira, Xavier Worthy, and I want a bad bitch, Jordan Addison Ray. Now, Cortland Sutton, I love. I will always be a Cortland Sutton guy. I was talking about years ago, Cortland Sutton's way better than Jerry Jeudy. And I mean, that take just looks beyond correct at this point. But Cortland Sutton, another one of these guys, he's just like Michael Pittman Jr. It's 2 peas in the pod, right? It's either going to be the biggest boom you've ever seen or the biggest bust you've ever seen, like you haven't cranked one off in like a month and then you let it loose, right? Cortland Sutton has been, starting at week 1, wide receiver 13, wide receiver 111. He scored 2 points. Then wide receiver 3. Then the wide receiver 13, 16, 88, 17, 36. Last week was his rare mid-game, right? The only mid-game this season up against the Cowboys. Troy Franklin obviously went crazy in that game. He was the wide receiver number 1. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Even someone that liked Troy Franklin because they were going up against the Cowboys. If I said, oh, he was the wide receiver 1 at the end of the week, I would have, talking to my old self, I would have said, Nick, you're fucking stupid. That doesn't make any sense. Cortland Sutton's going to be the wide receiver 1, right? But he's still the wide receiver 1 in this offense. The problem here, why I don't have him ranked higher, is because of the matchup. This is the 3rd worst matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. So while I am a Cortland Sutton super fan, while I told everyone and their mother to draft him this summer, and while Bo Nix is looking a lot more consistent, looking a lot better, the Texans defense has been really locking down teams. We saw them lock down the 49ers. Sam Darnold looked like dog shit against them, even though they ended up winning. The Seahawks, that is, when the Mariners lost. That was very sad. Obviously, watching that was crazy. Was when if you're watching that game on Monday Night Football, the Mariners lose, and at the same time, like the Seahawks start to kind of fumble the game away. And the fans were looking real shocked. I don't think a lot of people were watching that game though, because that was at like, I don't know, like I was gonna say 4 in the morning. That was at like 11:30 p.m. at that point because the game started at 10 for some reason. Because the NFL hates us East Coast guys. Going up against the Texans, again, Rough matchup, rough sledding, but Cortland Sutton has been too good for me to rank him lower than this. I get this may be a disaster class. I have a lot of wide receivers ranked ahead of him, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to start your stud, and Cortland Sutton has been a stud this season. Then we got Wandale Robinson going up against the San Francisco 49ers at home in MetLife. The 49ers are the 12th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. I expect him to bounce back after being the wide receiver 50 last week up against the Eagles. 2 games prior to that, up against the Broncos, wide receiver 21, wide receiver 9, up against the Eagles in their first encounter at home in MetLife. Seems as though, maybe Wandale's just a little bit better at home. This game is at home. So, again, while I'm not getting down on my knees and giving the guy the Gawk Gawk 9000 special, these guys are all fine plays. Then we got Khalil. I guess technically, if you're like, Nick, who's safer, Sutton or Wandale? I'd probably say Wandale. But I also think it would be hard for me to play Wandale over Sutton, which is why I have it ranked that way. Then we got Khalil Shakira, wide receiver 7 last time out up against the Carolina Panthers. 6 of 7 for 88 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 7. He scored 6 fantasy points the last game out in week number 6. Their bye week was in week number 7. Sorry, we don't have brain rot here. So going up against the Chiefs on paper, rough matchup. On paper, tough as nails. This ain't no Weenie Hut Jr. This is the 29th best matchup for wide receivers, but we expect this to be fireworks like the 4th of July. We expect this to be a high-scoring tit-for-tat Rock'em Sock'em Robots matchup. So while I am worried about Khalil Shakir potentially getting locked up Akon style and they throw away the key, Khalil Shakir has been pretty reliable this year. He should be able to get you at least 10 points with his upside being around 18 plus. So I like Khalil Shakir here. Next up, we got Xavier Worthy going up against the Buffalo Bills. With the resurgence of Rashee Rice coming back, Xavier Worthy's value is slowly dipping. It's fallen, and maybe he can't get up, but up against the Bills in such a high-scoring game, in a game where I expect Mahomes to have to pick a guy and let it fly, Dan Marino style, in a game where I figure they have to chuck the ball deep, I think Xavier Worthy could bust off a big one and have a big game. Plus, he has been pretty consistent this year, which is actually something I didn't believe would happen this season. Then we got Jordan Addison Ray. Now, with Carson Wentz, wide receiver 21 in his return game in Ireland, where they benched him for the first quarter because he was out fucking looking for some tail or something. I have no idea what he was doing, and they suspended him for the first quarter of the game like it was Johnny Manziel back in college. Wide receiver 19, wide receiver 12, then wide receiver 31 last week. Now, the reason why I don't have him ranked higher, I know there's a great matchup up against the Detroit Lions, is very, very, very simple. I do not trust J.J. McCarthy. I don't. So, while I like Jordan Addison, and while I've liked what he has done, I don't trust J.J. McCarthy and rank him higher than this. I know, Nick, you have Justin Jefferson as the wide receiver 9. That's because we're talking about Justin Jefferson. We're talking about Jordan Addison. Look, I'm not some Jordan Addison hater, but Justin Jefferson is one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver of the NFL. Jordan Addison is not, okay? That's simple. And I still like Jordan Addison, so don't come after me, but I like the matchup. I just don't like J.J. McCarthy. Then we move to tier number 5, headlined by Mr. Booty, Kayshon Boutte, the low-end wide receiver 3s, Quentin Johnston, Shamir DK, Trey Tucker, and Romeo Doubs. Kayshon Boutte is on fire. Kayshon Boutte has 4 tugs over the last 3 games. Can he keep it up is the question. He had 5 targets in week 6, 2 targets in week 7, 5 targets in week 8. If he could just get his 5 targets, I think you'll be happy. But if he gets 2 again, I think that kind of reeks of bust potential. Going up against the Falcons is a rough matchup. But again, when a guy who's ran as hot as Kayshon Boutte, I got to rank him this high. Then we got Quentin Johnston going up against the Tennessee Titans. Quentin Johnston is not the only 10 that I see because he scored 0 fantasy points in week number 8 up against the Vikings, in a game where Ladd McConkey bent them over the table, in a game where Kamani Vidal was running like he was prime Eric Dickerson, and then Quentin Johnston out there with 0 fantasy points, 0 targets. Like, he didn't even get a fucking target. Now, the week prior, he was the wide receiver 30, so I think, his weight will get pushed up. He'll have a better game, but I'm a little bit scared based on what we saw last week. Then we got Shamir DK going up against the LA Superchargers. 2 straight games as a top 16 wide receiver. Do I trust the Titans offense? No. Do I want to touch Titans players with a 10-foot pole? No. But do I like what I've seen out of Shamir DK? Yes. Do I like his connection with Cam Ward? Yes. No Calvin Ridley again, so I think you kind of have to just fall ass backwards into ranking him this high. Rough matchup, the 27th best matchup. But when a guy is this involved and seems to have a good connection with Cam Ward, where no one else seems to have a good connection with Cam Ward, and his snaps increased greatly from week 7 to week 8, I kind of just have to rank him this high. Then we got Trey Tucker going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know why the team still hasn't traded Jacoby Myers. The guy's like being held hostage there. Geno Smith sucks fucking dick to the highest degree at playing football. Jaguars matchup at home, in terms of a matchup, this would be the 8th best matchup for wide receivers. So maybe Trey Tucker lets it hang in this one. We did see him finish as the wide receiver 1, scoring 41 points at week number 3 up against the Chargers. But I don't really recognize this as a game where that's going to happen because, again, Geno Smith has really fallen off ever since then, gotten notably worse. But Trey Tucker should be able to get you like 10 points, so in a matchup like this, he's fine to play. Then we got Romeo Doubs. It's going to be very funny to see Romeo Doubs this week because he wears the Guardian cap, which I'm not, like, against wearing. I do think it looks fucking stupid, but if it's going to keep your brain intact, you know what? Do whatever you want. So he always wears that and it always looks funny. But this week, they're wearing, like, the throwbacks where it's, like, the fake leather helmet, where their helmet is going to be, like, a leather helmet. And the idea of him wearing a Guardian cap fake leather helmet is just so funny to me. That's going to look very, very funny. I like Romeo Doubs, but the emergence of Christian Watson really kind of takes the air out of the tire here on Romeo Doubs, who just scored 9 fantasy points last week. And I expect Christian Watson to get utilized more this week in terms of a matchup up against the Panthers. This is a bad one, too. The 2nd worst matchup for wide receivers. So while I still believe in Romeo Doubs, I still think he's a safety net. His safety is a lot lower now. Final tier here, tier number 6 with Wiki, DJ Moore, the YOLO wide receiver 4s, Juwan Jennings, Josh Downs, Jameson Williams, and Parker Washington. DJ Moore is banged up, but he did return to practice on Thursday with the hip and groin. I would expect him to probably be good to go. Going up against the Bengals, I'm excited about this. He just saw his best game, 2nd best game of the season last week. But again, he really does at this point kind of just feel like a floor play. Hey, I'm going to get my 8 to 11 points. And, you know, you're just kind of fine with it. But in a game like this, high-scoring matchup on paper, according to Vegas lines, maybe this is the best game for DJ Moore. Then we got Juwan Jennings. This kind of just feels like a game of Russian roulette in fantasy football. When it comes to the 49ers wide receivers, it's a big guessing game, and not every time you even guess the correct guy, it's even actually worth it to have played them, right? Just because you guessed right and you got the guy with the most receiving yards, the most fantasy points, doesn't even mean that the guy with the most fantasy points scores 10 plus fantasy points. Quarterback situation still kind of in limbo here. Going up against the Giants would be a matchup that I want to take advantage of. It's the 5th best matchup, but with Kittle back, McCaffrey trying to get his revenge for playing like shit last week, I think Juwan Jennings more than likely is just okay. Then we got Josh Downs. Josh Downs is another one of these guys that I wish I could just control the Colts, right? Like a marionette and just, you know, get them to play Josh Downs for more than like 55% of the snaps, give him like 80% of the snaps like Alec Pierce, and then we're going to be talking up Josh Downs. This is a wonderful matchup, but with the amount of snaps he played, he has scored a touchdown in back-to-back games. And again, the Colts offense is a wagon, so he's fine. But based upon the amount of snaps he plays, I can't rank him higher than this. Then we got J-Mo. J-Mo is another textbook definition of boom or bust, but he is like quite literally boom or bust. 7 fantasy points, then 19 fantasy points, then 6, 6, 2, 19, 0 up against the Bucs, sprouted by 0. 2 targets, 0 receptions. Despite the fact that Jameson Williams got the Sukalamink special, despite the fact that everyone was talking up Jameson Williams, I can't wait to draft Jameson Williams. I can't wait to have Jameson Williams on my team. This is going to be finally the year where he's consistent. The coaches are sucking him off. And then guess what happens? He's the same guy he's always been. Same shit, different day. Up against the Vikings, he could score a touchdown. He could have 150 yards. He could have 2 targets, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Right? He can. But why believe that, right? Why I truly believe in that. So that's why we got him ranked this low. Final guy here, Parker Washington. Parker Washingbeard, who should be the wide receiver 2 now, with Travis Hunter out of the picture. Will he actually be the wide receiver 2, though? Big question mark. They have other wide receivers like Diami Brown as well. So while I will give Parker Washington my stamp of approval, the stamp is like only 3/4 of the way on, right? You can still peel the stamp off because while I do think Parker Washington should be the wide receiver 2 in a great matchup up against the Raiders, I don't fucking trust it because I wouldn't be shocked if it's Diami Brown. I wouldn't be shocked if BTJ had 5,000 targets or if just some random player that you've never even fucking heard of now gets going on the team and he's the wide receiver 2. So a lot of reasons to be worried, but he had 10 targets in their last game. So hopefully we see more Parker Washington in this game. Sneaky waiver wire ads. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying today's video, hit that subscribe button down below. Like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help you out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out the Patreon to get my updated rankings as well as an answer to any of the questions you may have. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen them already. Love you long time. As always, good boy. Happy Halloween. Good boy.